Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tukenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Welcome. This week our Torah portion is Lech Lecha, which means go forth. And now this week our parashah starts with the beginning of the story of Avram. So as we open, we come to see that the first thing that Yahweh wants Avram to do is to have full faith in him, emunah, as El Shaddai. And he tells Abraham to go from your country, in your kindred, in your father's house, to the land, Eretz, that I will show you. And now, unlike the incident at Babel's tower, as in our last parashah, here, Yahweh tells Abram that I will make your name great in a great nation along with a blessing. And now, with full faith, what did Abraham do next? Well, he did as Adonai told him, and he went forth, but he did not go alone, but instead he also brought along his nephew Lot and his wife Sarai. His nephew Lot that he had possibly adopted as a son because his wife Sarai was barren at the time, and he wanted to continue his legacy on through his nephew Lot, who we later on find out is a different situation about. Now Abraham, which means exalted father, and I think that we would all agree that he had filled that role. But Abraham also brought all the people he had acquired in Haran. Now it is said that the people that he acquired, these were people who converted with him to the life of trusting in being monotheistic and having just one God, the belief of in one God, the true God. And these are the people who he acquired along the way. It was like, as you would say, like the Talmudim or the disciples went on converting people. It was such as that, like once they converted, the people wanted to follow him. It was also in Haran, which was also the name of Abraham's brother, which we know that his son was Lot, who Avram took along with him. And they set out from Canaan, but as Avram passed through Shechem, which will be the first capital of the kingdom of Yisrael, Adonai appeared to Abram and told him that he was giving him the land, that land. And following that, what did Abraham do next? Well, what Abraham did next was just as Noah did when he came out of the ark onto the dry land. Abram made an altar and called on the true name of Yahweh, which was a good deed in the eyes of Adonai. Now, as Avram moved on, there was a great and severe famine in the land. So what did Abraham do next? Well, at this point, he didn't truly have the full faith at that point that he should have had with Yahweh to let him know that he would be protected. And even though all these things were going bad around him, it would not affect him, that Yahweh would have took care of him. But he did have some fear and doubts at this point, so he moved on down to Mitzrayim, Egypt. But before he was about to enter Mitzrayim, Avram decided to concoct a half-truth, a lie for him and his wife to tell the Egyptians because of his fear of death because of his wife's beauty. Tiferet. Now, though it was true that Sarai was his half-sister, no doubt, the main thing that Abraham did wrong at this point was to not trust Yahweh wholeheartedly to protect him. And now at that time, before the giving of the 10 Commandments, it was okay to marry a sister or half-sister, is what I want to say. And Abraham was also wrong for lying to give someone the chance to not break a cultural rule by someone taking another man's wife, such as Melech David, King David, did, which was adultery and a sin towards Yahweh. As we find out later that because of Avram withholding that Sarai was his wife, it caused the plagues on Pharaoh and Abimelech, which also violated their own standards. Not only that, but Avram put Sarai in danger's way, and he was not going to be there to protect her. Now, what if Pharaoh had raped her? That would have been on Avram, because Sarai just listened to what her husband told her to do. But later on, Avram will have to listen to what his wife tells him to do and to send his son Ishmael away with Hagar. And moving on, as Sarai was taken to Pharaoh's house, and Abraham was treated well and given many livestock for her sake, along with female and male, each, Isha and Ish, Eved, servants, slaves. What happened next? Well, Pharaoh and his household were afflicted with Gadol, great plagues, which would also be a precursor, no doubt, to the 10 plagues that Egypt and Pharaoh would once again later on receive for not releasing Yahweh's people. And the next thing Pharaoh did was question Avram on why he didn't tell Pharaoh that Sarai was his wife. And Pharaoh wanted nothing to do with it. And he feared the plagues of Yahweh and returned Sarai to Avram and told him to leave along with everything that he had. Now remember, this situation would occur later on too, because once the children of Israel leave Egypt at the later time, they also were able to take all that gold and silver and the animals with them. And so Avram moved on into the Negev, which is a desert region of southern Israel, where he became very wealthy with many cattle and much silver and gold. And Avram moved on to Beit El, which means the house of Yahweh, back to where he built the first altar to Yahweh. Now, have you ever heard of the saying that too much of a good thing can be bad for you? Well, Lot, Avram's nephew, also had flocks, herds, and tents, and the land could not support all of his and Abraham's together. So quarrelling broke out between Abraham and Lot's herdsmen. Now Abram, he didn't want strife between him and Lot and their people, so he decided that it was time for him and his nephew Lot to separate. Now, another reason that it could have been possible that he wanted to separate at this point was because he seen that Lot was turning away from the righteous way, and he didn't want Lot corrupting him or his followers. Because as you know this, Lot wanted to go towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and basically he was saying that he wanted to leave true righteousness, because I could see no reason why, when you have somebody there who's speaking and conversing with the true heart of Yahweh, why would you want to leave that to go back to the ways of the world? What did you want to stay closest to that? I mean, later on in times, even when they had the apostles, the followers wanted to stay as close to the apostles as they could. And if they weren't strong enough, the more they removed themselves from them and stopped living a life of Torah and reading Torah, they fell back to the ways of the world, and they became of the world. And we remember what Yeshua and Yahweh tell us, that you can either choose one, you can't have it both ways. You can either be for the world, but if you're for the world, then you're against Yahweh. Or if you're for Yahweh and you're living for Yahweh, then you are against the world and the wicked ways of the world. So why, I ask you again, did Lot want to return to the ways of the world? Think about that. But next, he gave Lot the pick of the choice of land that he wanted to take. And Avram said, "You shall go left." Now, listen to this. He told Lot that, now, you shall go left, and I shall go where? Yes, that's right, right. Now, there is a big Jew of faith here, because Abraham said he shall go to the where? To the right. And now remember that Yeshua is seated where? Yes, at the right hand of Yahweh. Luke 22, verse 69. In Ecclesiastes 10:2 says, "A wise man's heart directs him toward the what? Yes, again, the right. But the foolish man's heart directs him towards the what? The left." And Abraham said, he will go to the right. And now where did Lot go? Yes, to the left, where a foolish man's heart directs him. And so Lot chose all the plain of the Jordan, setting up his tent near Sodom, where the men of Sodom were evil, committing great sin against Adonai. Now after Lot left, Adonai told Avram to look all around him, and that all that he had seen would be given to him and all of his descendants forever. Also that he would have numerous descendants, as numerous as the specks of dust on the earth. And Abraham moved his tent to the oaks of Mamre, and Abraham built an altar there to Yahweh. Now as time had passed, and there was a great battle well after Sodom joined, they then fled the battle. So then the enemy took possession of Sodom and Gomorrah and all that they had, along with Abraham's nephew Lot, who was then dwelling there. Well, as a blessing from Yahweh, Abraham got word of it. From who? An escaped man. And now when Avram heard of what had happened, with Yahweh's protection with him and behind him and leading him and guiding him and blessings, he and 318 of his trained men restored Lot and his possessions and all of his people. Now, the next thing following the restoration was that Yeshua now, see, now Yeshua was there as in the Old Testament, in the Torah. Now the next thing, like I said, was that Yeshua met him and met Abraham there as who? Melchizedek, king of Shalom, which is king of peace, which means king of perfect peace, who was priest of El Elyon, which means Yahweh Most High, which clearly shows that Yeshua was in the Old Testament or Torah. And he then blessed Abram with these words, "Blessed be Abram by El Elyon, maker of Shemayim and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you, Adonai." Also, Melchizedek means king of what? Righteousness. Now, as we move on, the word of Adonai then came to Abraham in a vision, as he informed him that his reward would be very gadol, great. But Abraham was troubled about not having a child of his own to inherit his possessions and rewards. Also, remember, Lot wasn't with him at this time anymore. So just as a comforting Abba, Yahweh then informed him that his heir would be from his own body and that his descendants would be as many as the stars that could see him. And then as the sun was about to set. Now get this. He said his descendants would be as many as the stars that he could see. Now, following that, it says later on, and then as the sun was about to set. So we see that apparently this time that he was speaking to him, telling him to look up and see the stars that he could see, it was daytime, so apparently he wouldn't have been able to see stars at that time because the sun would have been in the way. But now get this. The sun is the Ben as well, right? Which is Yeshua. And now we've heard that Yahweh's people will be few and not many. But the righteousness behind them will be so big that it wouldn't matter because their righteousness and the light coming from them would overshadow anything that's around them. Even the darkness, it would surpass the darkness, and the light would illuminate. So if he said to look up at the stars and it was during the day, what star would you see during the day? Exactly, the sun. So now his people would be few, but the full faith between and within all of them would emanate so big that it wouldn't matter if it was just one, because we know there are multitudes of stars out there that he would have seen had it been nighttime. But it's just saying all it takes is that one big star to overpower all of the rest of them. So it doesn't matter, even though there's many and multitudes of the ways of the world people, we can say, versus Yahweh's true people, his true followers, the sun. Now get that. Amazing, right? And now, as the sun was about to set, a great darkness came over Abraham. And Adonai revealed a nebula to Avram, a prophecy about his descendants being held in oppression for how many? 1, 2, 3, 400 years. But following that, Yahweh would avenge them. Also, that Avram would die at a very good age to join his ancestors. So now, back to Sarai. So now, as in Bereshit 16, since Sarai was barren, she took it upon herself to have her husband go into her Avedger, Hagar, expecting to maybe have a child through her, as like an adopted child. As they did at those times, this was considered like adoption for them. And well, Abram decided to listen to her. And as she soon became pregnant, Hagar, well, at this point, Hagar started to look down on Sarai. And Sarai confronted Abram about it. And he in turn told his wife to deal with her. So Sarai started to treat her harshly. And so Hagar finally ran away from her. Now, in my understanding, it is that it says that Sarai's whole attitude changed. She started treating Hagar harshly. But from what I'm understanding is that it is the way that she treated Hagar wasn't as it seems. It was because, see, Sarai was living righteously. She was as like the other half of Avram who was living righteously towards Yahweh. And now she was teaching Hagar this way to be righteous, to follow behind her, as a woman teaching another woman in the way. And it was kind of like boot camp. Like if you take the soldiers to the boot camp, it might be harsh at first, but that harshness is to train them to be better, so when they get in the field, they're prepared for the things. Rather than if it was soft and gentle, they wouldn't be prepared when they go out there and face battles and wars and see these things. But now, because she was helping her along the way, Hagar thought it was too wrong, the way that she was being treated, but it was actually for her own benefit. And that is why the angel, the messenger of Yahweh, had stopped her and told her to return. Because basically, if you think about it, Hagar was leaving with Ishmael. So she was going back to where? She was with true righteousness with Avram and Sarai in the right ways and learning, but she wanted to return to the ways of the pagans that she was once with and having multiple gods to rely on. So the angel told her to go back to righteousness rather than go forward to the abominable ways of the world. And that is why he asked her, where are you going? And where have you come from? To remind her that the right ways was with Sarai and Avram. But now, back to the story. The angel or messenger of Adonai found her by a spring into the desert. And as it turned out, the angel told her to return to Sarai. And that Adonai said to her, I will increase greatly your descendants, so many that it would be impossible for you to count. He also informed her that she would be born a son that is to be called Ishmael, which means Yahweh pays attention. So you see, as she was leaving, she was also taking this Ishmael, this son. So she was going to teach him the wicked ways as well. And now Hagar bore Ishmael when Avram was 86 years old. Now, could you just imagine that? A dad at 86 years old. But now remember, times were different then. And then he was also right there having support and protection by Yahweh. Now, most men at 86 years old need their diapers changed rather than changing an infant's diapers. But times and things, like I said, were different then. Now, when Avram was 99, Adonai appeared to him and said, he is who? El Shaddai, which means Yahweh Almighty. And he told him, as he tells us all today, to walk in my presence and be pure-hearted. Yahweh informed him that he would be a Abba to many nations as a covenant, that his name would no longer be Avram, exalted father, but Abraham, father of many, as he would be the father of many nations, and kings would descend from him. Also, that his covenant, and this covenant Abraham was to keep along with all of his descendants in generations after generations, that every male is to be circumcised that is 8 days old, including slaves. Now Adonai said that Sarai was to not be called Sarai, which means mockery, but now to be called Sarah, which means princess. Also, that he would bless her and give her a ben, and that she would be a mother of nations, as well as kings would come from her. But Avram then fell on his face and laughed, and again doubted Yahweh to some degree because of his old age of 100, and Sarah's of 90 to give birth. So Adonai told Avram that he should call this new son Yitzhak, laughter. Also that Yahweh's covenant would be established everlasting with him and his descendants, and that he would father 12 descendants who would, as we know, would form the 12 tribes, the tribes of the 12. Yahweh informed him that this time next year, it would be fulfilled with Sarah bearing Yitzhak. Now following Avram, then circumcised all that were with him. And Abraham was 99 and Ishmael was 13 when they were circumcised. Now, you can take away from this Torah portion that Yahweh is and was always there for his people. See, with Abraham to Moshe, with Pharaoh he saw that Sarai was beautiful and took her as his. And Pharaoh later on saw that the 12 tribes, as great workers they were, and took them as his. And Yahweh restored Sarai with plagues on Pharaoh. And later on, Yahweh restored the 12 tribes with plagues on Pharaoh. And last but not least, now Pharaoh called on Avram to take Sarai and leave with much silver, gold, and the animals. And later on, Pharaoh called on Moshe to take the 12 tribes to leave once again with an abundance of silver, gold, and animals. Now, in the half-Torah portion, Yahweh seeks to know why Yahov's descendants in Yisrael continue to complain to him as they did to Moshe, thinking their way is hidden from him and that their rights are ignored. But that is far from the case, as Adonai will never forsake us. The thing they forget is that Yahweh knows what is best for us and at what time it is best for us. That it is not for man, as man Ish cannot fathom all that Yahweh knows. But they should know that though the fittest young Ish man may stumble and fall, that those who have faith and hope in Adonai will have their strength renewed, and that nothing is impossible with and through Yahweh and Yeshua. That Yahweh hands over nations to those who are just and seek Yahweh and who hold him and his ways deep to their hearts. That Adonai is the same with them first of Ish, and will be the same in his love and ways to Ish at the end of days. For Adonai never changes. That as everyone else chooses to and creates idols, that Yisrael, Adonai's servant, who he has called out and chosen to be Kodesh, love him and him only, and will never be rejected by him. That he gives us strength and help and all the support we can ever need. That all of our enemies would be brought to nothing, nothing at all. And Yahweh wants us to have no fear. Just shalom, everlasting olam. As Adonai is our Redeemer, who is Yeshua. And with the gospel portion, well, it takes the genealogy of Yeshua and shows to prove that he was in due right to fully be acceptable to receive the throne of David, especially through lineage. Now remember that at that time, it presents Yeshua as the kingly Messiah, promised from David's royal line, as in 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16. Also as a son or ben of Avram in Bereshit 12:3, who all nations would be blessed, and for them to be blessed as well. Yeshua in Mattisyahu 28:19 said, therefore go and make people from all nations into Talmudim, immersing them into the reality of the Abba, the Ben, and the Ruach HaKodesh. Now remember that Jews kept extensive genealogical records, so these would be viable. So just a little something for you to think about. Well, the generations from Avram to Yeshua were 42 total. And 42 is in Revelation 13 verse 5, the tribulation time period of how many months? 42 months before the arrival of deliverance and our shalom, which is also Yeshua. Peace. Shalom. And now, for the Aaronic blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. This has been a weekly Torah portion from Following Yeshua Ministries. For more information, please visit www.followyeshuanow.com. Shabbat Shalom.